Good morning. This is Sarah Squires bringing you behind the headlines on today's edition of WYO Today Newsroom. Today's show is brought to you by Porters in Riverton. Check them out. They're at 750 East Sunset Drive. Today in the studio, I am joined by Cindy Olson Roden. She is the Executive Director of the Riverton Chamber and Visitor Center. Jackie Dorothy, she's a historian and author from Legend Rock Media. And we've got Cathy Cline, who is the project coordinator for the Wind River Country History Riverton Tour. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, part of what our show is really centering on today is this ribbon cutting that we've got coming up for a really cool new project. And it's coming up this Thursday, September 18th from 5 to 8 p.m. Cindy, what should we know about this ribbon cutting, kind of event coming up on Thursday to celebrate?
So this is in conjunction with our monthly after hours networking event. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be right on the Heritage Trail behind the Depot, a short part of that. So this is a combination of a lot of work that Cathy has done for this Riverton History Tour. So we're very excited to be a part of it and help promote this.
Well, cool. So we are kind of gearing up, marking our calendars here for this Thursday celebration. It's from 5 to 7 p.m. If you want to join in on the action, you got to meet us down here by the Heritage Trail. That's between the Depot Restaurant and Rotary Park. It's from 5 to 7 p.m. There's going to be free food, all kinds of action, and we'll get a little bit of a sample of this tour. Now, Cathy, I know you've been working on this for a long time. Can you kind of lay out what should we expect? What is this tour all about?
Thank you so much for having me here. It's something we've been working on almost 2 years now, and I like to think of it as an outdoor history museum. It allows you to kind of take that walking, bike riding, running experience and tie it into a cultural experience, and it just makes the whole walk a little more fun. And you can enjoy this history tour either by reading the graphic displays, the exhibits that are out there, or using your cell phone. You can we have an audio tour, sorry, and so you can get it both ways. So we've got some really great voices doing the narration on that. So for the Thursday event, you can park either on the Depot end, which would be, say, the bank parking, breadboard in that area, or the other end at the Rotary Centennial Park. So there's parking on both ends. So and either side will get you, but within that space, you'll have the opportunity to read two different exhibits, and then it's 4 audio stories in that same space. So it's just a little snippet of the entire trail. The entire trail runs, the Rail Trail or Wyoming Heritage Trail runs basically from Porters down to the river. So that's 2 miles. And in that space, there are 10 different exhibits. And they run from a little bit of geology and dinosaurs through the formation of the reservation to homesteading, trappers and traders. We talk about ranch life. We talk about energy booms. We also talk about Germans from Russia. So these are sugar beet families that came and worked the sugar beet fields. They were immigrants that came in. So all of those stories are told along that 2-mile path, along with then profiles of Chief Washakie and Chief Black Coal, and then 6 other Riverton, basically philanthropists and founders of Riverton that helped make Riverton happen. At that point, you hang left, you turn onto the Riverwalk. There's 3 more exhibits along the Riverwalk, and that takes you through the stories of tie drives and then tie pickling. And this I just think is really fascinating. We hear a lot about up in Du Bois. The tie hacks are up there. They're cutting down trees. They're peeling off the bark. They're shaping them into 6-foot ties. They're doing that all winter and spring. But come the winter snow melt, they would throw those ties into the river and float them down 90 miles to Riverton. Now, to make that happen, it took a lot of people. And so you had the hacks that were living up in Du Bois, but you also had people who were living here, who were on the reservation, who were living in Riverton, and they would all go up the hill and help those tie drives find their way down, moving day by day downriver with the ties until they made it all the way to Riverton. The railroad at that time was feeding the workers, and so they'd have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They're camping out, luckily it's summertime. Oh, it's actually about September they're doing it. And the railroad invited the workers to bring your families, bring anybody that wanted to come. And so, in the 1920s, and so that was kind of a nice little thing. But the 1930s, when everyone was experiencing the Depression, that was a bit of a lifesaver that those people could get 3 square meals, their entire family, based on these tie drives. Then at the end of the tie drive, there would be 2 drives per year, one right after the other, and they would have this giant party in Riverton, and they'd have a jazz band, they'd have dinner, everybody would show up for these big parties. This went on from 1914 to 1946. And was just a really big part. So we talk about ties, hacks in Du Bois, but it was a big part of Riverton too. They moved about 700 million ties down the river that way. Yeah. So that's just one of the stories that you'll find. The very last story actually tells about the birth of Riverton, and it was a rather chaotic birth. There was a land lottery first for the surrounding land, and then the town of Riverton properties were supposed to be open for squatters, which meant at a certain hour of the day, they could just run out and say, this is the piece of property I wanted. But they ended up they had 600 people show up. And there was a lot of chaos between the orders between Washington, D.C. and Lander and how it was going to work. So the military intervened. People were out there with their rifles, and in the end, they did that as a land lottery too. So it was a little crazy, but a fun story. So those are the stories that you'll find along the trail. Like I say, you can read them on these signs, or with your cell phone, you can hear them. And on the app for the audio tour comes through Travel Stories. So that's a Wyoming-based company. You just download the app. The narrators we have on that, you all know Ernie Over. He is our primary narrator. But Jack Schmidt, our cowboy poet, is also on there. And then doing the narrations of the story on Chief Washakie and Black Coal is Ivan Posey, who's Eastern Shoshone, and then Cy Lee, who's Northern Arapaho. So we have multiple voices in there, so nobody gets too bored, but it's really enjoyable.
Wow, that's really fascinating. It's really kind of like an odyssey through Riverton's history.
Travel through time.
So Cindy, tell us how you came up with these exhibits, and how did you find the stories that you wanted to really highlight?
Oh, it was a little crazy. I'm going to tell you, it was sort of funny. A friend of mine who was a part of the Wind River Visitors Council had said, we're looking at doing some signage for Riverton. And what do you think we should do? And we talked about 1838. Why do we not have a roadside sign for 1838? And so I started digging into it, and I found the Wyoming Parks has a monuments and markers program, and that's where I started. You have to apply for it, they have to approve it, they help you write it, all that kind of stuff. And their signs are, what roadside markers look like. They're these giant cast aluminum signs that sit on the highway, and YDOT usually has signage that points you to them, that sort of thing. So we started there and developed 6 different stories we wanted to tell. Right now we're telling 4 of them. And those are the 3 on the Riverwalk, plus 1 that's over by Porter's. But then we looked at the Riverwalk, and those would go through the city of Riverton as opposed to the state. Mm-hmm. Those were a little easier to do because we got to do them here totally ourselves. Mm-hmm. But because of the work with the state, I was hooked up with the Wyoming Historical Society, who helped me do the research, who edited the copy, made sure that I was saying things correctly. A lot of help from both tribes to make sure that we were telling the stories correctly. And we just hit what we thought were the high points of Riverton's history. Now, we know we didn't hit everything. I can tell you gaps that I see already, but this is what we could do with the funding we had available at that moment. And that was a big piece of it, is we had to get somebody to pay the bills on this. And so it started with the Depot Foundation. They had committed to a certain amount of money. We went to the city of Riverton and asked for Wind River Visitor Council Tourism Asset Development Funds, and they provided some money. Riverton Rotary provided some money. And then with that in hand, we went to the state. And the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund said, we will double your money. What you have here, we'll match it. Now we had enough to do something. That we could do the audio tour, we could do the visual tour, the graphic tour, and then also take this into the school system and do some other things with it also. So really grateful to all those players. That said, those are the people that came up with the dollars. There were a lot of people that just did labor. So Fremont County Museums provided all of the photos for us that we used. City of Riverton installing all of the signs, huge help from the City of Riverton. Wyoming PBS helped with the recording of the audio stories. And those are things people did voluntarily. So just terribly, terribly grateful for those. And the hope is, so I have a couple different hopes. I totally hope that school children are able to partake of this. But the primary purpose, I'm a big economic development person. I'm on the FAST team. I want to see Riverton thrive. And I used to be on the Visitors Council, so I've also been a real advocate for all the wonderful things you can do in Riverton as a visitor. And we knew from the Visitor Council that there are a whole lot of people staying in hotels they didn't come here to be a tourist, they came here because they're working. But they're sitting in a hotel after they get off work, and what is there to do? And it's like, well, guess what? You can walk this trail, and you can learn about us, and you can connect with us as a community. And so that is the hope. It'll get people out of those hotel rooms. When parents bring their kids for a tournament, whether it's soccer or speech or whatever, they got a couple hours in between games. They can, take the kids out on the trail and run out that energy and have a family experience. And so those are it. For me, it was generally about visitors and providing a visitor experience. But I do think there's two things about residents I think are worthwhile. I think if residents go out there, walk the trail, and enjoy the signs, they find a piece of themselves in these stories. And I definitely found a piece of myself in the story. I'm going to tell you about in a minute. But the other are for newcomers to the area. If you don't know anything about Riverton and you want to get a feel for it, man, do these signs. You will learn a lot, and it'll give you a lot of background for then the things that come next. But I mentioned finding your own, finding yourself in these stories. I'm going to admit, I'm going to cop to. I actually was able to tell a little bit about my own family in one of these stories, and that was the homesteader story. My grandfather had a homestead here in Riverton in the 30s. My mother, who lives with me now, is 94 years old. She would come here each summer. They actually lived in Nebraska. And so in the summer times, they'd come every year. And then in 1949, my mother's sister and her husband came and homesteaded here, and they brought with them their family. And a lot of people know the Lockharts. That's the Lockhart family. They had the farm just this side of Boise, and that's Don and Myrna Lockhart. They grew alfalfa. They grew a bunch of things. Well, I was looking. I wanted to tell a homesteader story, and as much as the museum had lots of photographs, they didn't actually have stories like a diary or something like that. But we just happened to have, Uncle Don had done sort of diary things over his years, and so my cousin pulled this out, and it tells the story of them settling. They came in 1949. That was a year that was massively freezing. They had to airdrop feed for cattle and stuff like that. And then 1950 was another really, cold year where it was negative 50 degrees, things like that for multiple days. So those were two really difficult years. But then their third year, and they're living in a sod hut, stuff like that. Their third year, the plants are coming up, everything's looking good. He's got 140 acres of alfalfa and beans and this, that, and the other thing. And then he decides, everything's beautiful, we're going to go fishing. So he and his brother, Bruce Lockhart, run up to Du Bois and do some fishing. as they're finished fishing, they meet Hugh Beebout, and he tells them, "Oh, by the way, you got hailed out." It's like, oh, dang.
Oh, no.
You know, what's that mean for us? But he actually thought Hugh was joking. So they're driving down, they stop at the Kinnear store, and without any provocation at all, the owner at the store says, "Oh, by the way, you got hailed out." Now they're worried. They get home, and in fact, they got hailed out. All but about 30 acres was ruined. All of his alfalfa was 4-foot drifts of dead foliage, and only 4 farms got hailed out, and his was the only near total. So they went through 3 years with almost no income. And he basically says, we were broke. And yet they stuck it out. They stayed. They farmed those acres. They grew it to 700 acres, and for 25 years they farmed here in Riverton. So that is what it took for a homesteader. You know, is to people talk about being free land. There was nothing free about it. One, you paid for it, but you had a lot of risk and a lot of hard work you put into it before that ever turned into anything. And so those are the kind of family stories that I think live out there in every one of our households. And that's where I'm going to turn to Jackie, because Jackie has been helping me work with my mother to bring out some of these really interesting historic stories that when you do a project like this one that we have, it really adds depth to the history that you're talking about.
Well, I guess this is my turn. Well, like Cathy was saying, one of the things is that we're trying to make history come alive. And I'll just say that I know that this has been her passion project for the last few years. It's not something that just happened overnight. She's been really digging deep into Riverton's history, and it's been fun to watch. And then I visited with her mother, Pat, and when we started talking to Pat, she's like, I don't have any history. I don't have any stories. But then you start talking, and my belief is everyone has a story. Everyone has something that's exciting and interesting, and it's just fun to be able to get those stories out. Like she's talking about being hailed out. People are like, well, that's just part of life. But for us, it's like they got 3 years of poverty, and they stuck it out. And that's what it took to make Riverton what it is. And so with her own mom, as we're talking, I found this fascinating. She grew up during World War II. She remembers she was 10 years old when Pearl Harbor happened. She remembers it happening from a child's point of view. We have so many stories. I mean, I have my own grandparents when Pearl Harbor happened. They were older, but she was 10 years old. Pearl Harbor happened, and then what happened during the war? What was her life like? Her parents had a hatchery. This fascinates me, is that they were entrepreneurs, they were making life, and they were hatching chicks and selling the chicks, not full-grown chickens and selling it for the meat, but the baby chicks. And that was their mom's whole business. And she talked about what life was like as a 10-year-old running around taking care of these chicks. And those are the fun stories that we need to capture, the details that make all of this come to life. And so with her walking through time, what Cathy has put together using all the community stories, it well invoked memories, especially to those that listen to our grandparents. When she was talking about the tie hacks, all of a sudden I had this memory of my own grandma, Flora Miller. She was Flora Miller Dorothy, but she was a Arapaho girl living on the edge of the creek, on the river, down on Riverview. And her mom would, when the tie hacks were coming down, she made all her teenage daughters go in the house, close the shutters, do not look outside, because these men were coming down the river. To keep them inside the house, she told my grandma that all these guys were naked, and they were not to see these guys. And that is the memory that this all brought out. I mean, that's one way to keep your girls single, right? And Grandma was sitting there years later, and she goes, I don't think they were naked.
But I think those stories are in every one of our households. To the extent that a person can pull those stories out, and working with Jackie has been great for me. but to get those stories out and work with the museum to get them to the museum so that there's someplace where multiple people can pull from them down the road. It would just, that was the hardest thing, was getting stories. Museum had great photographs, but not the stories. So.
Yeah. If you're just tuning in here, we're in the studio today. We're talking about an upcoming after hours and ribbon cutting put on by the Riverton Chamber and Visitor Center. And it's launching this really special project. I think earlier we called it an odyssey through Riverton's history. But what it is, it's called the Wind River Country History Riverton Tour. The event kind of debuting this project is this coming Thursday, September 18th from 5 to 7 p.m. It's at the Heritage Trail between the Depot Restaurant and the Rotary Centennial Park. There'll be food, and you'll be able to sample 2 of the exhibits and 4 elements of this audio tour. So it is an exciting project, and it allows Riverton residents, Fremont County folks, regional folks, and visitors from near and far to experience Riverton's history on a walking tour. So you can read these new signs that kind of tell 14 different tales, and you can also listen on your phone to the audio tour that kind of digs in a little bit deeper and unveils these different stories that document what early life was like here in Riverton and kind of all of the work that went into creating this city and this region. So it is a really interesting exhibit that will, show us a lot about our background and something absolutely, definitely to celebrate. Now, Cindy, when we were talking before, I know we probably don't have time today to go over every single one of these stories, but they are kind of at the heart of what this project is, and they are so fascinating. And I know you were mentioning before, the kind of shortened version of the first airplane flight, or maybe one of them from over 100 years ago. Tell us a little bit about that one.
So Riverton was the home of the first flight in Wyoming.
Wow.
An additional flight, the first time visitors were coming to Riverton, there were some folks that were going to come on a plane, but we had no airstrip. We had no airport. We had nothing. And so early in the morning, a bunch of citizens got out with their picks and their shovels and a horse-drawn road grader and got up on the hill and plowed out the sage and made an airstrip. And so about noon, the flight came in and the airstrip was in place. Everyone was so excited as the plane landed. They all run out to the plane. The propellers are still going. Dangerous as heck, right? But our first visitors got off the plane, and it just really speaks to how Riverton is a place where people do things. Citizens engage, and they make things happen in this town. And I kind of hope that that's a big part of the story that you get through the entire tour. So.
Yeah. That's a really fun one. I'm a little bit of a nervous flyer. I can't imagine being on an airplane
that doesn't have a landing strip.
Yeah, they're working on that now, guys. Don't worry about it.
Let's circle around again.
One other thing I want to throw in, and this is as me as a Rotarian, is the Rotary Club has been one of the sponsors on this too, and they will be at the after hours event. I think you guys have already talked about the shoe collection going on right now, boot and shoe drive. And so they will be collecting shoes at this drive. We only have a few weeks left. So if you got shoes you want to drop them off, bring them Thursday to the after hours.
Yeah. Right now, is the time where we're all looking at our closets going, oh no, we got to get the boots out, right, guys? So it's a perfect time to say, let's take stock of what we want to donate here for that Rotary project. Absolutely. I just want to give people a reminder of the details now. So the meeting spot here, it's Heritage Trail between the Depot and Rotary Park from 5 to 7 this coming Thursday. So there's free food, and you'll be able to sample some of these exhibits and get the kind of like the first listen, the first eyes on what we've got in store for this 2-mile stretch of trail that is, an entire journey through Riverton's history, documenting all these interesting stories of the people who helped shape this area and all of the hard work and dedication that went into that. So I am absolutely excited. Yeah, so Cindy, can you tell us a little bit about what gets you excited about this project?
So, it's just great. This is one more asset for Riverton to share with people, the residents and people that come and visit. And it makes me very excited. I want to get out on the Heritage Trail and see these signs so I can talk about it to tourists when they come to our visitor center. It's a great thing, and I appreciate Cathy and all the time she's put in and all the volunteers for their time, because it is a wonderful thing, and I hope everyone that's listening will want to come enjoy that as well and enjoy what we have here in Riverton.
Yeah, it's so great too that the visitor center is so close to a connecting part of this trail. When folks come in, you can just say, "Hey, walk down this block," and there it is. That's fabulous. So, Cathy, if people are interested in taking a look at the audio component of this, where do they go online to find that?
So you go to travelstories.com,
Okay.
TravelStorys.com. And there's an app there. You download it onto your phone. You'll search. You'll ask for the Riverton Tour. You download that onto your phone, and that way, if your Wi-Fi does wacky things while you're traveling, it won't hurt anything. But basically, as you come, it's GPS based. So as you come up to a display, it starts telling you the story, and you're at the kiosk. You can read it if you want to, or you can just look at the pictures and listen to the story. But then as you get up and start walking to the next kiosk, it starts telling you the next story right away. And so you get half of the kiosk as you're walking, and then half the kiosk as you're standing right in front of it. But it means you're sort of being entertained your entire walk. And I, people walk and run. I was never a cross-country kid or anything like that. I need something to keep my brain busy when I'm walking. And so I actually, as we've tested the tour and stuff, I've been doing a lot of walking on the trail, and it really has kept my interest. I'm not thinking about, oh, it's really hot and I'm sweating. I'm just hearing these stories that are so fascinating. And I mentioned the voices to you. Jack Schmidt is our cowboy poet. He does a handful of the displays, and it's just such a great voice. We have a lot of talent here in Riverton, so I appreciate that those guys all came up to the plate. I'm going to tell you something else about as we put this thing together. It took a lot of people to put it together, both for the funding, creating it, the narration. Nobody ever said no when I would ask them, can I have money? Will you help with this? Can we use your studios? Nobody said no. And that, I kept expecting there's got to be somewhere along the line somebody's going to stop me on this project. It never happened. We just kept pushing through.
Wow.
So there's two more signs we'd like to do. We've got the funding to do, and that is the 1838 site or sign that would sit on the highway right there by the museum. And then another one that would sit down by the sugar beet station on the other side of Riverton. And, one would tell the story about the 1838. The other one would tell the story about agriculture, and a really more in-depth story than what we're telling already in these. That's for next year. So we still have to get the approvals through the state and YDOT and all of that on those. And those are the most expensive sign, or the big cast aluminum signs. But anyway, so it's not quite a completely finished, but it is 90% finished, and I'm real thrilled about that. So
Yeah.
I would interject here. Knowing Cathy, knowing her energy and her passion, she's going to find something else that needs to be added. So I would just say that this is a live project that's going to continue growing, especially as you unearth more stories. And that's what's important. That's what I love about this, is all of the stories that she's unearthed. And it is going to evoke memories. And people, what we want is people to share those memories so we can preserve them, oral history is so important, but we need to write it down because it is being lost. And in this day and age, when you have a phone and you can push record, just start recording them. That's what we're encouraging people to do.
Yeah.
Talk to your phone.
Yes, talk to your phone. Or if someone starts sharing a story, you're at coffee and it's fascinating, just ask their permission, of course, but push that record button and preserve those. Again, it's about preserving our history and preserving. And one of the things that is important is our history is the 60s and 70s. Those stories need to be preserved, and they're not. So just keep...
Because we don't think of them as history yet.
But 50 years ago was 1975.
Yeah.
Just think of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So-
Yeah.
And there is room for more stories on the tour, especially along the Riverwalk. There's more space. There are stories I know we did not tell. And I'm saddened by that. I had limited funds and limited energies, but we did not tell the stories about how Riverton dealt with the various world wars, World War I, World War II, and everything that came later. Those are some stories worth telling. We were not able to tell the story about religious development in Riverton, and those are stories worth telling. The youth focused things like the schools and those. There are lots of stories we didn't tell. So as people go through these, if they say, I've got a story worth telling, tell the museum, tell the mayor, tell somebody who can help me then figure out how we could make an exhibit on that work.
Or reach out to Cathy herself. She'll make sure the story. I told you it was a living path, and it will continue to grow.
Yeah. I often think that a lot of people maybe they recognize like this has some historic significance for me and my family, but they maybe don't say, this has some historic significance for everybody. So, Grandma and Grandpa's love letters up in the attic, man, those are so fascinating. There are lots of different things like that, especially, you think we've got access on our phones now to be making these audio recordings and kind of recording things in this different medium. But back in the day, it was letters, and they tell us so much about what life was like, for our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and it is so important to not only preserve those, but recognize. Let's share them. Let's share it. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what Cathy brought me is that what I've been working with her is as a memoir coach and helping preserve diaries as well. I've been working with Jack Smith, and he has his mother's diaries, and he's like, well, this is just everyday life. And I said, and it's fascinating.
That's the story.
And this is the details that we're missing. We don't, you hear slogans, the old slogans of old and the slang, and we don't understand it until we read the context of what it was, what happened. I was heartbroken because online this lady's like, my dad left behind 16 diaries, and I threw away half of them because all it was his thoughts about current events. Oh, it was like, no, we want those. We want to hear what the construction worker thought about Eisenhower, and those are important to history. So I do stress, as people are talking about throwing out family papers, don't do it.
Yeah.
If anything, bring it to the museum, and they will preserve it because those are our history.
Yeah.
So don't discount any of those letters, any of those diaries, any of those notes, those Post-it notes you might find. They're all important.
I'll give you an example of how this kind of worked. I had some friends here in Riverton, and we were talking about heritage and stuff like that. And they were Germans, and my father was German, and we started talking, and there were three of us in the conversation. We weren't just German. We were Germans from Russia. And so that's the story about sugar beet families that's in here. These are folks who had been German for multiple generations. In the 1700s, Catherine the Great was the Tsarina in Russia. She had won the Volga region and the Black Sea region, which is Ukraine, in war, but she couldn't populate it because all her people, her peasants, were part of the serf system, and they were tied to landlords. She had no people. So she calls out to all of Europe to say, I got land, please come farm it for me, and I will give it to you free, and you won't pay taxes. You get to maintain your language, maintain your culture, all of that. And a bunch of Germans said, yeah, sure, we'll go. And so they went to those regions and farmed it. The sunflowers, the wheat, the rye you see today in the Ukraine, they farmed. And in the mid-1850s, is when the sugar beet was, I'm going to say invented, but developed. And so they started growing that there in Russia. And so they basically farmed that area for about 100 years. Before the Bolshevik Revolution, but as it's starting to happen, the serf system has been broken, and the peasants now are finding the Russian peasants, they want their own land, and they're jealous of these Germans. They're jealous of the Germans and the Jews who were there at that particular time. And so there started being these violent pogroms. And the folks living there saw the writing on the wall, and that's when there was this huge migration into America of Germans from Russia. Now, you'll find them in Nebraska and both Dakotas. They're massive there. But you'll also find them in Kansas and California and Wyoming. And those, in this conversation we had, we discovered that there were a lot of Germans from Russia right here in Riverton. And so that's what made me think, this is a story we're telling. People don't really realize it because they don't talk about it, you know. And so that's our sugar beet family story is talking about those immigrants. And that would have been in the 1910s, 20s, and that they were coming into Riverton at that time.
Wow. So many stories to tell about what kind of goes into our history in this area, the families that make up the fabric of those stories going back in time about how this area was really built and who came here and all of that hard work that they put in. And it is so exciting to know that we're going to really showcase and highlight some of that here. So one more time before we go, I want to remind you about your chance to get the first look inside of this project. It is the Wind River Country History Riverton Tour, and we're going to celebrate that with an after-hours chamber event with a ribbon cutting this Thursday, September 18th from 5 to 7 p.m. It's along the Heritage Trail between the Depot Restaurant and the Rotary Park down by the river, and you'll be able to sample 2 of the exhibits and 4 elements of this audio tour. And we've got some free food for folks. It's a family-friendly affair. Make sure you mark your calendars and check it out. It is just a little preview of this entire project coming up here that's got 14 different exhibits and stories that really showcase the lives that shaped this area and something for us all to celebrate. So thank you so much, guys, for joining me today to really highlight all of the hard work, especially you, Cathy. I know you've done so much for this project.